When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come proclaiming to you the word of God in lofty words or wisdom, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in much fear and trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but with the demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might rest not in the wisdom of men or women, but in the power of God. Whenever I begin a course in Scripture, I always begin with this reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 2, verses 1 to 5. And the reason why I do that is because the sentiments that Paul expresses in these verses are the sentiments in my own heart. This mystery of God, and it is a mystery, and the meaning of a mystery is this: there is something about it that I know, and something about it that I do not know and will never know. That is when we call something or someone a mystery. So in that sense, every one of us is a mystery. But Paul is talking about a very, very specific mystery, and that mystery is the coming of Jesus, because in the next verse, after speaking about the mystery, he speaks about what the mystery is: Jesus Christ and him crucified. And the weakness and the fear and trembling are not because I have not prepared my classes, and not because I have never conducted a Zoom class before, and not because I am afraid to speak in public. So these are not the reasons for my fear and trembling. My fear and trembling is because during these days, we are going to talk about a person. And I think that Mark, more than the other evangelists, brings out very, very powerfully the humanity of Jesus. So you encounter a Jesus who, on the one hand, is so strong that he can go and clear the temple, and on the other hand, is so gentle that he will tell the disciples, "Let the children come to me," and he puts his hands on them and blesses them. We encounter with Jesus in Mark, who is so strong in faith that he will tell the Jairus, even as he is told that his daughter is dead and not to trouble the teacher, he will tell Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe." Then when the disciples tell him, "Why were we not able to cast it out?" This kind, Jesus will say, can be cast out only by prayer. And the same Jesus who in Gethsemane will pray to the Father to take the cup away, and the same Jesus who on the cross will say, my God, why have you abandoned me? And so the question is, how do we begin speaking about such a person? And that's why, like Paul, my speech will not be in plausible words of wisdom, but hopefully it will be with a demonstration of the Spirit, that your faith might not rest in what I am saying and the insights that I will give you, no, but that your faith might rest in the power of God. And so the sentiments of Paul, fear and trembling, could lead me to say, because Jesus is such a fantastic mystery, it is better not to talk about him at all. That is one way of dealing with the mystery. And another way of dealing with the mystery is to say, I really will not be able to speak eloquently. My words may not be plausible words of wisdom, and yet I will make an attempt to stammer. So during these days, we are going to talk and encounter, hopefully, this person of Jesus, God made manifest in Jesus. And so therefore, before any word can be read, before any word can be interpreted, what I would like that you keep in mind, and these two texts, which I will bring down one after the other, must be kept in mind at all times. And someone might say to me, but are we doing Mark or are we doing John? Because these texts are from John. We are doing Mark, and we are doing an introduction to the gospel according to Mark. But these insights which the evangelist John has given us will be the insights that we will keep in mind even as we are reading the Gospel of Mark. So what does John tell us? He says, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written. So what is the evangelist saying here? He's telling us that there are many things which Jesus did, which I have not written in my book. In other words, he's saying, I have chosen, I have selected of the many things which I could write, I have selected a few and I have put them in my book. So first thing, notice, he has not written everything which he could write. Did many other signs, but these signs I have written. Why have I written? Because I, the evangelist John is saying, because I, John, consider them important to show you, to reveal to you that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And more importantly, these have been chosen so that believing you may have life. So there are a number of things which the evangelist is also cautioning us about. First, he's saying, my work, and when John speaks, I would like to believe he's speaking also for the other evangelists, because they have done the same. My work, John is saying, is not a history novel. As a matter of fact, we must keep in mind that even the so-called historical novels can never be objective. Nothing can be objective if it is being written by an individual. So if I am writing about my experience today and it becomes history tomorrow, it will still be my experience. Supposing I were to ask each of you to write down at the end of this class a review of this class, what you learned, what you heard, how the class was, and so on and so on. Each of you will write down. 5 years from now, what you have written will be history. It will be something in the past. And somebody will go through all of your manuscripts, that means the things which you have written, and that person will be able to interpret those things, but will also realize that the same event has been written about in a completely different way by all of those who wrote. And if there is such a difference, there can really be no objectivity. So John the evangelist, and therefore Mark also, is cautioning us that they are not going to write everything that could be written. They are writing some things, and the things which they consider are important for believing that Jesus is Son of God, and that believing you may have life. So it is not a history book. It is not a book which John is saying, I have taken and written down everything I could. As a matter of fact, in another verse in his book or in his gospel, once again, the evangelist reminds us of something similar. Here, he uses what we call in English as hyperbole. Hyperbole means exaggerated language. So the evangelist is using exaggerated language here to make a point, but reminding us of the same thing that he reminded us earlier, namely that there are many other things that Jesus did and that he has not written them down. So each evangelist, and this is the point I want you to keep in mind, is writing what he believes is important first. Second, the evangelist is writing what he writes from his perspective. And so therefore, there are 2 points I want you to note very strongly in this slide, and basically those 2 points are, first, that you will realize that this course is an introduction. Please understand, it is an introduction. In other words, in the 30 lectures that we have, it is not going to be possible to even study in some depth the Gospel of Mark. So it is an introduction. Second, what is very, very important to keep in mind is that it is the Gospel according to Mark. Notice, it is according to Mark. So therefore, keep this word according in mind. In other words, it is how Mark sees this Christ event, of how Mark sees the mystery of God, the mystery of Jesus, the mystery of the cross. So the 2 key words that you will keep in mind when we study are, first, introduction. So it is an introduction, and second, it is according to Mark. Now, I would like you to use the chat to answer this question, through which I am going to make a point. Listen carefully to the question, and then in the chat, simply write down your answer. And the question is this: what is the prayer which Jesus taught his disciples? Please write down, what is the prayer which Jesus taught his disciples? Very good. Very good, very good, very good, very good. It's called the Lord's Prayer. Very good. Abba Father, the Lord's Prayer. Very good. And someone put Our Father. Excellent, excellent. Now, first point is this. When you hear a question like this, you must ask me a counter question. Namely, which gospel are you referring to? Because first, the Lord did not teach his disciples any content of prayer in the Gospel of Mark. The Lord did not give his disciples any content of prayer in the Gospel of John. The Lord did not give instructions to his disciples when they asked him about prayer, except in the Gospel of Luke. It is only in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, verses 7 to 13, that we read in the context of the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus teaches what we call the Our Father, because Matthew uses the pronoun our. In Luke 11, verses 2 to 4, the prayer is in the context of the prayer of Jesus. Once Luke will say, when Jesus was praying, his disciples went to him and said, Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples. And in the context of that request, Jesus teaches his disciples to pray. And so, before you can start answering, some of you have answered thinking that your answer is correct, the Lord's Prayer and not the Our Father. No. No, you got to say, which gospel? Supposing I said, I meant the Gospel of Mark, then all of your answers are absolutely nonsense. There is no Lord's Prayer anywhere in the Gospel of Mark. So what do you mean? So you got to be careful when answering questions. Okay, now, the point here is that we are doing the Gospel according to Mark, and notice I have put here chapter 1, verse 1 till chapter 16, verse 8. Now, if you were to go through the Gospel, what you realize is this. You will say that at the end, whether you got the NRSV, whether you got the RSV, or any other version, you will see below there is a shorter ending after chapter 16, verse 8. There is also below that a longer ending. So you notice, you say to yourself, is it the shorter ending? Is it the longer ending? So you ask and say, why do you say you're ending the gospel at 16:8 when after 16:8 there is another ending and there are verses in the longer ending up to chapter 16, verse 20? And I say, we will talk about those verses later, yes, both the shorter ending and the longer ending, but I am very clear about the fact that the Gospel of Mark and the original Gospel of Mark ends in chapter 16, verse 8. And most scholars are of this opinion, and this is the reason why They have in the NRSV, in the RSV, the shorter and the longer ending below the original work. And that's why, even though there are versions, and it's also read during the Easter week from verses 9 to 20, I would like to say that our study will focus mainly on Mark chapter 1, verse 1, and which will end in Mark chapter 16, verse 8. Very briefly, I want to suggest, if you have the benefit, the advantage of living in a seminary or in a religious house, then you might be able to go to the library and access these books. Now, these books which I'm going to speak about, basically, the first one, namely, this one is a book by Gundry. Gundry is considered a very, very good depth scholar, and so therefore his book would be a book which surely you will gain a lot from. Then there is this basic thing of the word biblical commentary. Now, word biblical commentary, like Hermenia, like Anchor Bible, like New Interpreters, are all basically companies which hire authors to write for them. So there is this word biblical commentary, there is the Hermenia series, there is the Anchor Bible series, there is the New Interpreters Bible. All of these are very, very beautiful, very, very good. And you might say that they are basically wonderful works. When they hire scholars, so the one I'm talking about is Robert Gulick, and WBC refers to word biblical commentary, they request the author to use the same format. So supposing you are going through any word biblical commentary, you have the same format, no matter which author has been chosen, no matter which book of the Bible has been chosen to write about. So you have got, for example, the introduction, then they'll give you an exegesis, then a detailed exegesis, then the comment of the author, and so on. So the advantage of these commentaries is that they follow a fixed format, and they have chosen excellent authors, and all of these authors have done a fantastic job. Robert Gulick has done a very, very good job with the word biblical commentary. The first 8 chapters, notice, chapter 1, verse 1 up to chapter 8, verse 26. Now you may say, but what is the reason why he ended at 8:26? For 2 reasons. First, very, very clearly, most scholars believe, and I am one of those who agree with them, that chapter 8, verse 27 and till verse 30, which most regard as the watershed of Mark's gospel, begins a new writing in the Gospel of Mark. In other words, Mark's gospel can be seen to be divided into 3 parts. First, 1:1 till 8:26. 8:27 to 30, the second small part, and from 8:31, the next part takes off. So if you were to ask me to divide the Gospel of Mark into 3 parts, I would say 1:1 to 8:26, 8:27 to 30, which is called the watershed of Mark's gospel, and 8:31 to 16:8 would be the third part in my estimation, according to me. And therefore, this is a good commentary. In 1987, a group of very eminent scholars, and invited by Robert Funk, they met together to discuss the parables of Jesus. Now, the parables of Jesus, many of them, scholars believe, come from Jesus. However, these scholars did this. They sat down together and had a great long discussion. And their discussion led them in the final thing to come up with three parts. First, they said these words in this parable are definitely 100% from Jesus. If you believe that, taking not only verse by verse, but even words within a verse. And they had boating. And they had three compartments, and they had marbles in which they would do. So those who believe the words, a sower went out to sow, or a sower from Jesus, then put red. Went out to sow is not from Jesus, but it is from the early church, then put blue. Later, if something is much later, then put green. So red, definitely Jesus. Blue, early church. Green, much later than the early church. And then they divided that and will give you in this book. That's why it's called the red letter edition, the parables of Jesus. All the parables of Jesus are, in a way, divided into this part. So when you read red, you can see very clearly this is said by Jesus, but this is not said by Jesus, and so on. It's a good book for the parables of Jesus. That is why I am suggesting it. Adela Yarbrough Collins is a feminine author. She's not a feminist, but she's a female author, and very, very good insights into the beginning of the gospel, probings of Mark, and she also has written the commentary for the Anchor Bible. So you can see Anchor Bible. This is her own book, and for Anchor Bible, she has written the commentary on Mark. Supposing you're one of those who likes to read stories, then this book of Yersel is for you. Van Yersel, while a very detailed scholar, is also one of those with the ability to write very simply. As a matter of fact, part of the structure which I will propose to you when we come to the structure of Mark is from Yersel. And I find it's a very easy book to read, reading Mark. And this book is about 280 pages or so. So you can finish it quite quickly because it is quite easy to read. Even though Marcus has written a commentary on Mark, this is another book which I'm suggesting to you, The Way of the Lord. He gives Christological exegesis of the Old Testament. Mark has used the Old Testament on 12 occasions at different times in his gospel. So Marcus gives you a Christological exegesis of this. In other words, why has Mark quoted the Old Testament here? How does it apply to Jesus? What is it applicable in the life of Jesus? Now, the word biblical commentary, the reason why I have put this down, first of all, you will notice it is much later than the earlier one, which was 1989. This is 2002. Robert Gulick, who wrote the first volume, died a little after that writing, and so this is why Evans was chosen. Chris Evans is also a detailed scholar, and because it is word biblical commentary, you can be assured that it will be of some value, and it will be a commentary which will give you some depth and good insights. Ernest Best is regarded as one of the foremost scholars in the Gospel of Mark, and he has a number of articles written, Disciples and Discipleship, the Son of Man in the Gospel of Mark, the Son of God in the Gospel of Mark, and so on, in these studies, which you can find in Edinburgh, T&T Clark. Rhodes and Mickey, like Yersel, regard Mark as a story, and I believe that Mark is surely and primarily a story. So they give you an introduction to the narrative of a gospel, and read, of course, I would like to believe that when you did an introduction to the New Testament, you surely would have been introduced to Wilhelm Reed. It is because of this book, The Messianic Secret, that the whole study of Mark took on a new meaning. Reed had this seminal work, this original work in which he spoke about the messianic secret in the Gospel of Mark. And because of him, this was in 1901. In 1901, he had this insight, and after him, studies in Mark have undergone a fantastic, fantastic change. I want to move on to only 10. I could give you many, but I want to give you 10 characteristics of the Gospel of Mark. These 10 characteristics are special to Mark. In other words, no one else has these. There are others also, which I would not want to burden you with now, which we will deal with as we come to the text proper. But for now, I would like you to understand these 10 characteristics. And the first of these is that Mark is the shortest of all gospels. Notice, Mark has got 678 verses in his gospel. If you were to ask which is the longest gospel, it would be Luke. Luke has got 1,151 verses in his gospel. So Mark is the shortest of the 4 gospels, not only because Mark has a mere 16 chapters. Matthew has 28 chapters. Luke has only 24. And yet, Luke's gospel is longer than Matthew, because the verses in Luke's gospel are 1151 and in Matthew only 1071. But Mark is the shortest of the 4 gospels. Mark is that evangelist alone who mentions explicitly that Jesus was baptized. In other words, very clearly, he was baptized by John. Notice, Matthew and Luke also have the scene of the baptism of Jesus. But what do I mean by saying that Mark alone mentions that Jesus was baptized by John? Because in the Gospel of Matthew, there will be what we will call an objection. As soon as Jesus comes to John, John gets nervous and tells Jesus, I should be baptized by you and you are coming to me. Jesus says, let it be so for now. And then John baptizes him. So there is an objection by John. There is a clarification by Jesus. And then Luke will not even tell us who baptized Jesus. So when I say that Mark explicitly mentioned, Mark does it for a reason, because for him, the baptism of Jesus is an extremely, extremely important event. Unlike Matthew 4:1-11, Luke 4:1-13, in which we read the 3 temptations, in Mark, there is no mention of the 3, and there is no dialogue between Jesus and Satan. Supposing I were to ask you a question, which once again you can write in chat. We can only see the introductory slide. Now can you see? Yes, okay. So the characteristics of the Gospel of Mark. Mark is the shortest of all the 4 Gospels. Mark explicitly mentions that Jesus was baptized by John. There is no dialogue between Jesus and Satan in the desert. The Sabbath was made for the human person. This statement is not found in any other gospel. And the family of Jesus is shown in the Gospel of Mark in a negative light. They come to restrain him because they had been told that he is out of his mind. It is only in the Gospel of Mark that we are given the occupation of Jesus and also that he is referred to as the son of Mary. Now, while it is likely that the reason why he is referred to as the son of Mary is because his father had died or his foster father had died, in my opinion, this reference is very, very clearly an insult to Jesus. The people who regard him as son of Mary are saying, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary? Which means we know that his mother is Mary, but we do not know who his father is. Only in Mark, among the synoptics, does Jesus twice use external methods to heal. The first time, it is in Mark chapter 7, verses 31 to 37, where he heals a deaf man with an impediment in his speech. The second time, it is in Mark 8, 22 to 26, where a blind man is healed in two stages. In no other synoptic gospels does Jesus use external methods. The parable of the seed growing secretly, also called by some the growing seed, is found only in the Gospel of Mark, and it is a very, very special parable which we shall see when we come to it. The total abandonment of Jesus is portrayed vividly in the Gospel of Mark in this scene which Mark alone has, namely in which a young man who sees the trouble in the garden comes out to see what is happening and runs away, leaving his loincloth. He runs away naked. Mark uses the sandwich construction on at least 6 occasions in his gospel. And the first time the sandwich construction is used is in chapter 3, verses 20 to 21, and chapter 3, verses 31 to 35. What does the sandwich construction mean? Since the time is 9:40, I will stop here.